This is Empowered Human Academy. Welcome home.
It's just this almost really encouraging cycle where the more I show up as me and speak my truth, the more empowered I feel, the more good I feel about myself, the more connection I have with other people, and it encourages me to keep doing that.
This is about love. This is about light. This is about the idea that you have everything you will ever need.
And this life of yours, this is where you grow, you expand, and you remember who you really are.
I'm Abe.
I'm Isaac.
In Empowered Human Academy, we join with humans of all kinds to feel the inspiration that can only come with empowered living.
The stories you hear today are unique, but the energy you hear today belongs to you too. So, with hearts wide open, let's begin.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Empowered Human Academy. Today we are joined with someone who has been in our life for a few years and someone who we've been dying to interview for so long. And we are just so grateful that you're here. Melissa Urban, how are you doing today? What is up? What is on your mind? I can't wait for our conversation. How's it going?
Hello, it's so good to see you both again. It's been a couple years. I think last time I saw you was in Chicago, and we've become just much better friends since then. And I'm so excited to sit here and speak with you both today.
Thank you. Same. We begin the way we always do, with the question of identity, and not the identity that we might put forward, not the way we introduce ourselves, though there may totally be overlap. But when you come home to yourself and you're not wearing a role of any kind, what words of identity feel like home? What feels like it fits?
I like that. When I think about identity, I kind of go back to this idea of worth. To me, they're almost entwined, but not in the way of I'm a CEO or I'm a mom or I'm a wife. And in words like I'm kind, in words like I'm generous, in words like I'm motivated, the things that you can't take away from me, no matter what happens in my life, this is kind of always how I will show up. And I think the word that I feel the most attached to in this moment is truthful. I'm feeling very truthful lately, and it feels really good.
Okay, cool. Tell me about that. Why is that important right now?
Yeah, well, it's been a journey for sure. There was a period in my career and in my personal life where I wasn't truthful, and not because I meant to be, dishonest with folks, but I had a hard time showing up as myself. I felt as though I had to show up perfectly. I needed to set, some kind of unattainable example in order for people to take me seriously and to believe that I was actually good at what I did for work. And my relationship wasn't going so well, so it was hard to be honest about how I felt in that moment. And then once all of that kind of shifted and I ended up getting divorced, and I bought my ex-husband out of the business, and I was able to move forward kind of under my own steam, it became very important to me to only show up as myself going forward. And I felt the more I did that, the more empowered I felt, the more comfortable I felt in my own skin. And of course, the more that resonated with other people. So it's just this almost really encouraging cycle where the more I show up as me and speak my truth, the more empowered I feel, the more good I feel about myself, the more connection I have with other people. And it encourages me to keep doing that.
Yeah. Where did that cycle begin? Like you talked about several different shifts there. Were those all choices, or were those things inevitable? Or like, how do you begin that cycle?
I know some of it was inevitable in that, we went through this really difficult period in 2015 when the Whole30 book came out. And we were under book contract to promote this book together as a husband and wife team. And in the meantime, we were very quietly in the process of separating. And we couldn't tell anyone because we had this contractual obligation to the publisher and to our agents and to the community to show up together. And so we came together in that year in a really, I think, impressive way and put our personal stuff behind us to show up for this project. But once that was over and we were able to say, this is where we are personally, our paths are diverging, it was like I could take a deep breath. Finally, I no longer felt like I was showing up as any other kind of version. And that was the moment where I realized that I actually had a bit more freedom to start speaking my truth in other areas too. So that was kind of the catalyst, I think.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Tell me about the first realization that like truthful means, oh, and I'm totally putting words in my mouth, so please correct me. Truthful means freedom. Does that sound right?
Yes.
When did that dawn on you?
Yes. I think there are so many instances in which I've just had that affirmation. I remember doing a podcast with Jason Wacob of Mind Body Green. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. He's a dear friend. And Mind Body Green is such a wonderful outlet. And I did a podcast with him, and it was the first time I ever spoke about my sexual trauma, like ever publicly.
Yeah.
And it was, I left that podcast and like I was so sick. I was so sick. And so just the vulnerability hangover was like so extreme. But after that wore off, I was like, oh, I can talk about this. I can talk about it. And it felt really good to own that piece of my story and not have it kind of hiding in the dark and have it be out in the light. And it takes away some of the shame and some of the heaviness. So I've had a lot of breadcrumb moments like that along the way where I take the leap of vulnerability and say to myself, like, okay, you're going to share just this one thing because it's important, or the universe is telling me to, or like God is just beating on my door right now with it.
Yeah.
And then I have that experience where I'm like, okay, that went well. That was good. That felt good. And it encourages me to continue to look for those kind of breadcrumb moments. Yeah.
I think you answered my next question just then, but I want to be explicit about it. Like, what's the difference between going into a situation that feels like it's going to make you physically sick, but it's a good thing, versus it makes you feel sick and it's not a good thing? Like, how do you tell that up front?
Yeah. So, okay. If it makes me feel sick, just thinking about sharing it, I don't share it. I'm not ready to share it. So I have some parameters around the things that I share publicly and what I keep for myself. And one of those parameters is that I have to have processed it effectively in my own life before I start talking about it. Otherwise, it's just, I've heard the phrase like trauma porn, right? It's just, it's too raw. It's too open. I am probably speaking on it from a place that like isn't settled or isn't grounded in it. So if I feel kind of icky about it before the words even come out, then like it's too soon. If I feel comfortable going into it, like, you know what, I am ready to talk about this, and then I feel kind of sick afterward, that's a totally okay sign. That is a sign that like I did something brave. And yeah, it does feel a little scary to have it out there, but like I went into it knowing that it was the right thing. That's just how I think about it.
Everyone who knows you and follows you online and who has met you in person, I think a lot of them would characterize you as someone who is really self-actualized, and you actually give people advice about boundaries and the things that you have learned in your life. Has self-actualization been in the forefront of your life your whole life, or has it been through maybe traumatic experiences, or what's your relationship to self-actualization?
Yeah, it certainly has been not a part of my life going forward. In fact, it was kind of the opposite when I was growing up and in my childhood. What was modeled for me by my family was that if we just don't talk about bad things, then we kind of don't have to deal with them. And that was what was modeled to my parents from their parents. And so I was not particularly self-aware and saw no need to be, because being self-aware means sitting in that discomfort. And we just dealt with discomfort by pretending it didn't exist. But it wasn't until the trauma, and then later my drug addiction, and then later my recovery, where I realized I was going to have to like unpack all of these boxes and look at all of the stuff that I had been shoving down, that I realized that I had to start looking at some of this stuff. And once I started, it felt again so freeing and so empowering that I kind of just didn't want to stop. And now, I feel like I spend a lot of time working on myself, my own personal growth, my own spirituality, my relationship with God, my own therapy. And the reason I do that is because it just feels good. There's always a little bit more to unpack. I could always do a little bit better. I could always evolve out of, old thought patterns and really look at whether those thought patterns are still serving me. And I take great pleasure in that practice. So it's something that I am pretty committed to because it just feels good.
Totally. And I know, you and I both have a Whoop band, and I feel like what I've learned is that there's so much like actual data when it comes to, taking care of yourself. Like my heart rate's better and my sleep is better and literally my recovery is better. And it's just like so fascinating that all that goes into not just feeling better externally or maybe, emotionally, but actually our body actually feels a lot better, which is fascinating.
Yeah, I totally agree. I like looking at these stats. I don't get super trapped in them, and I don't think I necessarily like tailor too much of my life to them, but it is nice to see like the highest day of Whoop strain. One of the highest days I ever had was the day that I didn't do any exercise whatsoever, but I was stressed out of my mind. And that was so interesting to see how that stress cycle impacts me physically. So there are all these little like signs and markers that you can use to combine into this like big picture idea of health. Yeah.
Totally.
I'm excited that you mentioned just like feeling good, frankly, because I feel like it's only recently in my life that I came across the idea that that can be enough of a reason to, make choices. And I didn't always know that. And I want to know about your relationship to feeling good and placing any sense of importance on that. Was that something you always had? Or because I know like people have way different backgrounds with this. Like there can be guilt associated with feeling good. What's your relationship to feeling good and how did you get here?
Yeah, it's so what immediately came up for me was this idea of like paying myself first, right? We talk about
Mm,
self-care and
sure.
what that really means. And I think we used to think self-care was like bubble baths and pedicures. And I talk a lot about how self-care are just the tiny choices that you make
Mm,
over the course of any given day to remind yourself that like you're worthy of using the fresh Sharpie or the good
mhm,
fork or the good sheets or, eating the last of the chips because someone's going to do it in the household and it might as well be you. And so when you think about this idea of feeling good, if I feel good, if I'm rested, if I'm energetic, if
mm,
my mental health is good, if I feel connected to God, if I've had time to move my body, everyone in my life benefits from that. I'm a better mom. I'm a better wife. I'm a better leader. I'm a better, community mentor. I'm a better friend. So I think this idea of feeling good, it certainly does probably for some have a negative connotation, as in, well, that's a very shallow pleasure or it's a very selfish pleasure, but it's not.
mm,
Everyone is
mhm,
happy if I feel good. And there are very small actions that I can take in the name of like self care that help me do just that.
mhm,
Going on a little tangent about putting yourself first and leadership. We have a team of 10 and you have a team as well. Um, how do you put yourself first, and how do you put yourself first in your business, and does that get in the way of serving others? You know what I mean? I've just been kind of thinking of the idea of like, yeah, we got to take care of ourselves first, but we're also leading other folks.
Mm-hmm.
What's that relationship to you like in your work?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, as a leader of my organization, I take very seriously the idea that I have to model the behavior that I want my team to, embrace. So if we
mhm,
talk about work-life balance, if we talk about summer Fridays, if we talk about unlimited paid time off, which we have at Whole30, if we talk about mandatory mental health days, I need to be taking that time off and I need to be modeling taking that time off. It's not you go ahead and take that time off, but I'm going to be sending emails and working away. It's really important that I show up for the organization the way I want people also to show up. And there have been a few instances in my career, like when I got my concussion a couple years ago, where I had to really prioritize my own health because if I didn't get healthy, I wasn't going to be able to show up for the business at all. And because I had this relationship with my team and because it was so important, it was easy for me to say, like, I can't record my podcast anymore right now. I can't show up for these media things. I can't, take any interviews right now. Like, I have to get healthy first. And my whole team really rallied around me. That's a very almost life or death situation. Like my very health was at risk. But when I think about other, areas where my mental health is poor or I'm struck, my son is having a struggle that day, I take the time off. I do. I take the time off and I do that unapologetically because if I don't show up feeling good and at my best, I'm not as good for the people that I work with.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Has there been a time where you were apologetic about it?
I felt really I probably apologized a lot when I had my concussion. I
mm,
really struggled with having a long-term brain injury where like I looked fine and a lot of, I could do certain things just fine. I could go to the gym and work out, but then I wouldn't be able to hold a conversation like this for more than 10 minutes. And if there was a ring light in my face, it was 5. So it was a really weird, I struggled and I have so much empathy now for people with chronic kind of invisible illnesses. I probably apologized a lot. I felt like I wanted to show up more and I just couldn't. And that part was really hard for me. But that was my own journey, In
mhm,
general, I am not an over apologizer, I would say. No.
Hmm. Hmm.
we were exploring this idea earlier. I feel like there are things that like our personalities predispose us to in positive ways. I feel like there are like some freebies that we get in life.
Yeah.
What are some things that you've talked to us about truthfulness and that cycle. what are you stepping into? Like, what are you learning right now? Like, where are you developing your thoughts?
Yeah.
Or where are you developing right now?
Well, one of my personality benefits, the bonuses, is the idea of saying no. I've never had a hard time saying no. I'm not a people pleaser. There are a number of things that go into this, but like that is just my like natural nature. And so part of what I'm stepping into is just it's expanding my own empathy, my own understanding of my privilege, and trying to learn more about other people's life experiences so that I can better impart the thing that I find pretty easy to someone who might find it a lot harder. So that's definitely an area that I've been focusing on for the last like year or two, is like, okay, what is my life experience? What are my privileges though? And how do I float through the world a little easier than this person or that person? And how might their experiences influence their, ability or capability of saying no or holding boundaries, and how could I assist in that situation? So that's definitely something I'm invested in. And I'm still exploring this concept of truth, how much do I want to share and in what capacity do I want to share? That's always, I think, a living, breathing line for me. Yeah.
A thing that I love about this podcast is we bring in CEOs, artists, lawyers, all these people who society deems as, successful. And I just love, and I do it air quotes because we're also very human as well. And I love exploring the humanity behind the titles. And I think it's really beautiful when we share like these learning opportunities that we have in our own life, so people can be like, oh wow, like we had a CEO who stepped down for 7 years in his company to then like work on himself because he didn't want to be a CEO, and then he's now back to the CEO position, and like who knew that could be a road that you can take. And I just love like giving people different ideas of what is possible. So I guess my question that I've been thinking about lately is like, what does that line look for you? Where does that boundary look for you in terms of like the Melissa that people see online, the Melissa that people see on TV, the Melissa versus the Melissa that your friends see? Like, where does it seem, how does that connect with truth for you?
Okay, so one of the things that I believe anybody would say is that if you met me at the dog park or at Whole Foods or at a book tour, I'm going to show up in front of you exactly as I show up on social media and exactly as I show up on media. I've had a lot of people tell me that. I take it as like the highest compliment, that I am exactly the same as I, portray myself on social. That's really important to me, but it's also like, I wouldn't know what else to do. Like the only thing I can't get wrong is be me. And the only thing that feels good is being me. Right. But I do think a lot, and I've mentioned this before. So I like Brene Brown's intimate versus personal. That's kind of a guideline that I've always used. I will share things that are personal. I will tell you what I ate for, and like my idea of personal is probably very different than a lot of people's, and that's cool. But I'll tell you what I ate for lunch. I'll tell you that we went to Vegas with the family. I did tell you that one time I got chlamydia. I posted about that on social media, which some people might consider intimate, but for me, it was important to like go first. But I do keep back the things that either are too special. My son is one example. You will never see a photo of him on social unless you're in my close friends group. I know you guys do. But photos on social media or even say his name, that's something I hold back. A lot of details in my marriage, things that I've talked about in relationships. There have even been things that I've mentioned on social media, like, oh, I've been struggling with this. And people say, oh, will you talk about that? And I'm like, no, I'm not ready to talk about it yet, actually. So I think sometimes it's a feeling or a gut feeling. I think sometimes it's just this feels too close and too good for me to want to share it with anybody because so much of my life is public. But that personal intimate is something that's kind of always rattling around in the back of my head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that totally makes sense.
That makes sense. Where do you glow? That's the question that I want to ask right now. Like what spaces in your life do you pass through and they resonate with a part of you that feels like you said, feeling like you feels the best? Where does that, is that a thing you step into? No, there are many different ways I could ask this question. Yeah. Where is that happening for you? Like notably right now?
Yeah.
Like, where do you have the easiest access to yourself?
The first thing that comes to mind immediately is my son. He's 8. And he will grab my phone and take pictures of me, right? He'll say, Mom, can I take a picture? And he's taking pictures of the environment. And it's always like a 482 photo burst, right? He just puts the hammer down and holds it. Yep. he takes photos of me like just beaming at him. I am beaming at this child, like so just vomiting love through every like pore in my body. And that makes me so happy. Those are some of my favorite photos. But like I show up just so open and authentically for him. And I really love that relationship. I'd say another space is when I go to church, when I hike, when I'm in the mountains. I'm dirty and sweaty and covered in bug spray and sunscreen and mud and, and just beaming from ear to ear. Just couldn't be happier. So those are two spaces where I feel the most like myself and the most just like full of joy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does that, okay, two questions. First one, how do you, how do those experiences connect with your experience outside of those experiences? That's a terrible way to ask the question, but like, do you return to it for the contrast? Do you go from those spaces back into the rest of your life carrying that energy? Like how are those experiences integrated into the rest of your life?
Yeah, I don't think like I'm overall a pretty happy, joyful, content person. So it's not like a night and day when I get done with my son and come back to whatever. And I'm like, oh no, my real life is like so hard. Or I don't go to church and come back feeling like it's, been a vacation and now I'm back to the drudge of the real world. I love my job. I love what I do. If I sit down and I'm writing a new book, that makes me super happy. If I'm in the DMs or recording a fun story, that makes me super happy. I love spending time with my husband and, doing stuff with him, whether it's just like random stuff around the house, playing with the dog. So there isn't as sharp a contrast, I don't think. Awesome. It's easy for the normal day to day to kind of dim your light a little bit, right? It's kind of hard to like glow when you're doing dishes and, picking up dog poop in the backyard. But overall, I don't think there's that much disparity.
How does one, if you're talking to somebody who's hearing that and going, wow, I cannot identify with that whatsoever. How do you talk about, let me first say, like, I feel you. I feel that about my life right now, and I freaking love that, and I'm glad I get to be able to say that. But I want to talk about what goes into building or growing or developing or finding a life where you can say that. Like, is that a thing that is built? Is it a thing that like one internally kind of falls into? Like, how does one approach that kind of like being able to say that kind of thing truthfully?
I think it starts with like going through a whole lot of crap. I have been through very hard things in my life, right? I was a drug addict and had to quit heroin. I went through a very public divorce and business split. I was a single mom to a 1-year-old. I had a head injury that I had to deal with for 2 years. Like I've definitely been through some stuff. Therapy. I'm a huge fan of therapy. I've been in therapy basically since I entered into recovery. I'm still in therapy. I love it. I've tried a dozen different modalities. Anything that helps give me tools to process discomfort and stress and work on that growth, I'm a huge fan of. The work of Byron Katie has been incredibly impactful in my life. She has this practice called The Work that helps you kind of question or differentiate your story about what's happening from what's actually happening. And when I was going through my divorce and business split, it was both the most stressful time of my life and also the happiest. And it was because I realized that in that moment, I was going to be going through all of this stuff no matter what. I was going through the negotiations, through the pain of being a single mom, through the grief of losing a marriage. Like I was going through that no matter what. And I could either choose to find happiness through that and figure out how to see like happiness through it, or I could choose to like let it be miserable. And it's not as easy, I know. And I wouldn't say it's as easy as like, well, you can just choose to be happy. But in that moment, I had the tools and I had the capacity to make that choice. And because I did, I ended up having, a really fantastic year. And I feel like I go back to that over and over again, that even during my concussion, which was also incredibly stressful and like really painful, I really wanted to look for kind of some of the silver lining to it, which it's, again, a hard thing to kind of prescribe for other people. But for myself, it just happened to be the path that I knew would make me kind of the happiest.
Yeah. Tools and capacity. I feel like this feels like an important concept. Is that usually a thing that's in play? Like, how do you think about that?
Well, tools are, certainly something that are like learned and earned. So I didn't have any of these tools until I went to therapy and started unpacking my trauma and started going through, working through my addiction and the reasons that I used and all of that stuff. And then I learned a lot of tools for analyzing my own life, for looking at my own stories, for kind of rewinding some preconceived notions that I always had, for untelling the stories I had about myself and my worth and my value. So I learned all of those tools, but those tools are only good if you apply them in the real world. And that's one of the things I think that another kind of gift of my personality style is that, like, I'm really good at calling myself on my own, BS. So once it's part of this like cycle, but I tell the truth and I'm open and I'm vulnerable and it feels good and it makes me feel empowered. And then when something stressful happens and I revert back to old behavior and I close off and my armor goes up and I start gaslighting or manipulating people in my life, it feels terrible because I've experienced what it feels like to actually live and like stand in my truth. And that feels so much better. So I don't stay in that place very long now, because now I have this contrast of like, this is how you could be showing up and it feels better. And this is how you're showing up now. And it used to feel good, but it doesn't anymore. So it's okay to let that go.
I think that concept of tasting what it feels like to feel good or feel healthy or feel in your truth, feel like you're in your truth, is just like, I think such a privilege. And also like, it's really hard to get there. And there are some areas in our life, in my life, that, we have a really healthy relationship. And I'm like, it's also because of the hundreds, probably over the last 7 years of ours, that we've had to parse through some really hard shit and like tears and all this stuff. And like, but when you get to the other side of that, or the other side of a Whole30, when you like understand what it feels like to not sleep like shit or whatever it is, like, how can you go back? And I think like, what are your thoughts? I kind of ponder this sometimes. It's like, why do we go back sometimes? Is it because we're human? It just happens. We're going to ebb and flow. Because like, if we feel good, why don't we stay in it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, with food, you have all of these kind of confounding factors, like the kinds of food that we're eating, the biological response to chronic stress and how it makes you crave sugar, learned diet culture and societal pressures and peer pressures. Like, there are certainly a lot of factors around food. I think we end up going back to old behaviors because in times of stress, the brain will always revert to what's easy and what's immediately rewarding. And until you have, I think, kind of clawed your way out and had enough time in that space of like feeling better, you're going to automatically like hear and have those echoes of, but you used to do this and it used to feel good. And many of us are not. It's a lot easier just to be like not super self-aware around how that doesn't feel good anymore, right? Because if you do the thing that you used to do and you recognize that it no longer feels good, now you're in a position where you're like, oh shit, I have some stress going on. I used to do this and it was the only thing I knew how to do. Now this doesn't feel good and now I have nothing. And that's scary. So, Byron Katie says that like we often prefer the hell we know to the unknown. And when you really think about it, that applies. We would rather be in hell, but at least have it be familiar, than take a step out of it into the unknown.
So what has been your process then with the unknown? How have you stayed, a question that I wrote down is, what's been your process of being in the hard, and how have you gotten through that, the unknown? Because a lot of it's probably unknown. If things come up, you're like, oh shit, like that's a red flag. You know what I mean? What's been your process in being resilient through it, because it's hard, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I like the idea that once you see something, you can never unsee it. And it doesn't mean that you'll take action and change immediately, but you will always have a glimpse of like this other thing. So the Whole30 is a great example. Once you see it, you can never unsee it. And when you go back to the way you used to eat and the way you used to feel, you will always know that there's like a better version that exists, right, of you in the space. Yep. I do the same thing with my personal growth issues. And I use the work of Byron Katie quite a bit to question my own thoughts around a situation. So I have a stressful situation. I feel a certain way. I'm telling a certain story about it. And if I can somehow, using these tools, see that story like may not actually be true, I can never unsee that. And now when I want to go back to it and hide back in it, there's always a piece of me that's like, but that's not like the only way it could be. So unseeing it, I think, first, and using whatever tools you can, whether it's therapy or talking to a good friend or the work of Byron Katie or whatever you need, whatever protocol you can, I think is very, very powerful, because at least you sense that there is another option. Yeah.
Okay, so rewinding all the way to the beginning of this conversation, we were talking about identity, and you listed off a couple attributes that could not be taken from you. Truthful was on the list, and truthful is something that's that you're building. Talk to me about motivation. Is that like a freebie with your personality also, or is that a thing that you have built? Where does motivation come into play?
I think it's part of my personality. I think it's one of the
Okay.
things that, like, I just came out of the womb and like that's just how I am. I make a joke that I was a very successful drug addict for 5 years, and that is the same energy that I bring into like everything I do. I have learned over the years to moderate. I have, but I'm a very like I go, I just go all in. It's not hard to go all in. If I say I'm going to do something, I do it. If you need me to do something and I think it's a good idea, I'll just do it. So I think motivation definitely is something that's just kind of like written into my DNA. I have done a lot of therapy around this idea that I pride myself in being an active person, and active in the physical sense, but also active in the sense that like I'm not passive. I don't let things happen to me. If I want something, I go get it. If I want to change something, I go change it. And it's not always good to be attached to that active word. And that's definitely some work that I've done. But I do think that that is a part of who I am.
What's your relationship between your contentment and your motivation? And do they kind of banter or just kind of like pull each other, kind of wrestle with each other?
I think they coexist quite nicely, to be honest. When I am in a period of like hustle or motivation, it's not that I'm not content. I think I'm content in the in the pursuit. The pursuit makes me content. The idea that I've established something that I want and I'm going to get it is great. Where I'm trying to think of times when I'm not content. Definitely when I'm either struggling with a decision or like I know the right decision, but I haven't quite accepted it yet, right? Because I like to, God pushes me in certain ways, or I like know the right thing to do, but I'm like fighting it and just don't want to admit it. And that's definitely a situation in which I'm not content. But the motivation itself is certainly not like a barrier to it. I enjoy the pursuit of it. Once I, settle on something that I find that very, I find that I can be content in that action.
Totally. Yeah. And I'm curious because in my experience in the past and just some people that I've known, like it's either you're content or you were taught that you need to be content and don't want more or motivated for more, or you're the opposite, and you're always like motivation means you're hustling all the time and you're never content. So I love that combination and that cocktail because I feel like I used to be really motivated and never content.
Yeah.
And now I'm motivated and content. And it actually feels really good. And it feels really grounding and more powerful because then I'm not spinning on a hamster wheel because I can stop when I want to and go to my church or eat the meals that I want to eat whenever I want kind of thing and feel good about it versus just churning out things that are for the sake of motivation.
Yes. There is nothing wrong with being so content with where you are in the moment that you just don't want anything else right now. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And I have gone through periods of that where I've just like let stuff ride. I'm going to let it ride, right? I'm going to let my therapy ride. I'm going to let my business ride. Like everything's great. I'm so happy with where I am. I'm not feeling particularly motivated to attain something else. Why can't I just like sit in this for a little while and enjoy it? And I love that. I'm a huge advocate for that.
And have you ever struggled with not doing that?
Oh yeah, early on when I first founded my business, absolutely. It took a couple years, I think, for me to, I had to learn to reject the like hustle culture, especially as a new entrepreneur, the like more is more and you're always on call and there are no rest days and, no days off and all of that stuff. Yeah, I think I did that for a little while. And then I quickly learned that I was going to burn out if I did. And, made some pretty quick changes, but it's been a while, I feel like, since I felt like that.
Amazing.
I'm reflecting on the idea that you put forward about like you can never unsee something, and once you see a better version, like that's it somewhere in you forever until you act on it. To me, that kind of feels like better is inevitable given that idea.
I like that.
How does that feel to you?
Oh, I love that. Almost as if once you see it, it's like a little light that you're just gravitating to, right? There's something to be said for this idea of manifestation, where your brain and your energy goes, the rest of you will go, and what you put out there, you attract. And if you have this light of like, it doesn't have to be this way, it could be that way. Now, instead of being focused on this old story, you now have this light of the new story that you're moving towards. I like that idea. That can probably be very encouraging for people, I think. Yeah.
And speaking of changing the story and kind of changing the game, you have changed the game in a lot of ways. Like Whole30 is now a Chipotle, and you're seeing it. I'm seeing it in like the Whole30 approved logo in little remote towns in northern Wisconsin. I'm like, girl, my friend Melissa helped start that. I'm like, yes, but it's more so like you're changing it, and I just kind of want to talk about the kind of the gravity of that. Do you think about that a lot? Do you think of the responsibility? What is the kind of the human, not polished CEO on TV side? Like what goes into this? I know you in Chicago when we met, you talked about the partnership with Walmart, and you were like, listen, if you don't meet my meat standards, then we're going to cancel this partnership. But you wanted to do it at first because, you wanted to give access to folks. Tell me about that whole process internally.
I rarely take a step back and am able to see where Whole30 is from like an outsider's perspective. It's really hard for me to do for a couple of reasons. One, I'm still super involved in the day to day, and I'm very closely connected to the community. And so my head is down and I'm listening and I'm learning, and what else could we do for you? And what else could we do to make this program more accessible, or, increase representation, or make it easier to do the program, or more convenient. So I'm very entrenched in the day to day. And then because I founded this in 2009, I have a hard time seeing us as what we are today. I still see us as this like scrappy little company who's just word of mouth and making it happen. And, that's definitely how we started off. But we do have these really big partnerships, and we do have influence in things like retail and trade magazines. And so every once in a while I'll have a moment, and usually it's when someone asks me a question like this, or I'm at some kind of event where I do take a step back, and it's almost like I get a moment where the veil is lifted and I get to see the experience like for what it is. And I'm always really taken aback by it. It's always like really humbling and startling. But then I would rather just like dive right back into the day to day and how can we keep making it better? And I'm not going to sit on like any kind of laurels or anything. I'm really proud of what we built. I am, because what we've built means that more and more people every single day can do the Whole30 and can have that life-changing experience. But I don't take a step back too often, for better or worse.
Totally. Yeah. This is the second time where the idea of like how we perceive situation versus how it is has come up. And I want to know how you think about that. Like there's the idea that like our perception is our reality, and this is tied to the whole manifestation thing, and there are times when like our version of a story in our head is more useful to stick with or not, like what you were just talking about, or if not useful, like preferable in some way. Is one more real than the other? Is one more important? Is it important to get outside of our own story? Like how do you think about that balance between like what I perceive a thing to be versus what it actually is, and what does that even mean?
Oh, I think it's always important to question your story about a situation. Okay. It's always important to get that outside perspective. Your story about it is rooted in so many things that just live inside your head, your historical experience, your childhood, what was modeled for you, trauma. There's so much that goes into like your story, and that story does become reality. It becomes the reality of what you have. And the irony is that if you continue to act on that story, you can in fact bring upon the very situation that you fear with that story. So, I think about a story about a partner where, the partner is like a little distant for a day or two, and you're like, oh, this person doesn't like me anymore. They don't want to be with me anymore. So of course, when you believe that story, what do? You pull back. You maybe armor up a little bit more. You don't give yourself to them as much. And then that person responds to your behavior. And now all of a sudden you're bringing about, when it comes to my business, the story I have that we're this little scrappy, gonna make it work, that doesn't serve me if we really want to grow this business. Like it's not helpful. So what I do is surround myself with good people on my team who can come in and say, no. Like these are the partners that we need to get. And this is what we need to charge for this. And this is how big I think this project can be. And these are the kind of magazines I want you to be in. And that's incredibly helpful for me. That's purposefully why I bring these people into the organization, because if we keep going, just by the way, I think in the story I tell about Whole30, I don't think we would have grown anywhere near the degree that we have.
Okay, so this is not just like adjusting your own story, or like you said, a question like what Abe asked might give you a moment of like, oh shit, this is bigger than I thought, or than I felt a minute ago. It's not just adjusting your story, but also like having other stories played out around you that augment the whole. Is that right?
Well, I mean, the story is different than what happened. So my story is that Whole30 is this young, scrappy, like gonna, word of mouth. But this is where we are. This is what our revenue stream is. These are who our partners are. These are the people that are walking around with a menu on Whole30. This is the number of books you've sold. So, distancing myself from like the reality of it and then acting on like the reality of what it is, I think is really important. I like holding on to the story that we're just like the little engine that could. I think that does serve us in a couple ways, in that I want to maintain the integrity of the program. I always want to maintain the authenticity. I want to remember where we came from. Apple tells the story that or Hewlett Packard came out of like somebody's garage. I think that's a cool story, but I can't let the garage story stand in the way of like where I know we can take this business, because the bigger it grows, the more people I get to help.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
How do you go about choosing like the voices to add to the way the story is told? I think I'm phrasing that poorly, but like,
no, yeah.
Like you said, you talked about bringing in people who can like see it through this lens and say, okay, we need to do this, or this is even possible.
Which, good job. I love your staff. Shout out to Dr. Coley. Shout out to Jen. Shout out to all the amazing people.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to back this question up a little bit. In the context of a business, it's obvious to talk about like, how can this thing grow across certain metrics? But if we back this up and talk more abstractly about life, how do we, like, there are places where my story is limiting me in some way that I'm not conscious of yet. Is that important? Like, do I need to do anything about that? Do I need to wait for just someone to knock and tell me that I'm missing something, or what?
I mean, so I'm certain I still have stories that are absolutely limiting what I do. And typically what happens is that we enter a moment of crisis. And whether it's like honest crisis, or it's just, I'm struggling in this area, or I'm anxious about this thing, or, I have this decision to make and I don't know how to do it. And that's where all of a sudden someone else, or you, if you have the tools to do it, can say, oh, okay, now, so what's going on with this? Like, why am I anxious about this? Why am I worried about this? I went through a lot of that when Brandon moved in with me. We're married now, but he moved in with us a couple months before he proposed. And I went through a lot of those like questions I had about what it means to like live with a partner again, because it had been a few years. And it wasn't until we both said, we want you to move in. I'm really excited about you moving in. And I was like, oh, but I'm not ready yet. That I was like, oh, okay, well, there's obviously something there. And now it's time to like question it. So when you want to take an action and you find that there's something standing in the way of it, or, you want something for yourself, or you notice some anxiety, like there will be cues that will pull out the idea that like maybe there's something worth questioning there.
This feels like the complement to the idea of like, we see something better and that's in our mind forever. Like we, like the opposite of that. Like there's a dark spot over there that I haven't figured out yet. And now I know that that's there, and now I know that it needs to be dealt with in some way. Yeah.
That's a really good way to put it. Absolutely.
Is development inevitable? Like, is it a question of like, let me make sure I have motivation somehow, either because I'm born with it or I come into it in some way? Like, are we going to make progress inevitably? Is that even optional?
I mean, no, you could fight it if you want to. You could work really, really hard and not make any progress at all, I feel like. Maybe.
You say fight it though, which implies like action, right? And like if I drop the fight even for a second, oh no, I've made progress, Let
me see. I think back to days where I deliberately chose not to see the signs and signals in a desperate attempt to keep things exactly the way they were, even though I wasn't very happy, because the unknown was really scary. And because I knew the process of getting there would be uncomfortable and painful. And so I don't know that progress is inevitable, in that you do ultimately at some point have to make a decision that like, what I'm doing isn't working for me. You have to at least admit that. What I'm doing isn't working really well, and like maybe there's a better way. But I know, in my own experience, that there can be years, when I was an addict, that I recognized that things weren't working for me, but I wasn't able or willing to do anything else about it. So I don't know that I would say it's inevitable. It does involve some level of like conscious decision.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Speaking of change and choosing, and how that connects with like the people that you surround yourself with. Are you the type of person that has a hard time taking feedback as you develop your own personal journey?
No, I think I can say that I do not. Nope.
Cool.
I don't take things personally
Okay.
in that I don't see negative feedback as like a criticism of my worth or my value. It just depends on who that's coming from, right? If you're a stranger on the internet, I don't particularly care about your feedback. Sometimes, well, that's not even true though, because sometimes strangers on the internet will give me they will show me how they're experiencing me, and the first question
Yeah.
I ask is like, oh, can I find that? Can I find that? And is there any piece of that true for me? So sometimes it is strangers on the internet. But I would like to think that after the initial defensiveness, which I think sometimes does still come up for me,
Mhm.
I don't think I have a hard time accepting feedback. And especially if you're already in my circle of trust, it's always very much appreciated. I have a few folks in my circle who are real straight shooters. And I think I love them more than anyone because that's all like cut to the chase, be super clear, be kind about it, but be super clear. And I respond very, very well to that. Yeah.
I'm married to one of those. I'm happy that you have someone
Yeah.
My dietitian is one of them, and especially when it comes around food, she's super direct, but I feel so safe around her. So
Yeah.
I'm always curious about, because in the gym, for instance, right? As a person who never worked out, as a person who didn't know my body, I needed to be in a safe environment in order to fall or feel safe to grow.
Yeah.
And is that universal? Do you like, because it doesn't seem like you might feel like that, because and what you said about it doesn't take away from my worth, and these are the things that no one can take away. Is that the distinguishing factor in safe spaces? Question mark. Is that the right question? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. First of all, I do think it's universal. I do think that growth has to happen in some semblance of a safe space. I think when it's not a safe space, the hierarchy of needs is not pointing us towards growth. It's just pointing us towards finding safety, right? That's the bare minimum, I feel like. So I wasn't growing when I was in that, not healthy marriage and relationship. I wasn't growing. I was just trying to kind of like survive and figure out where I was going to go next. So I do think that that is a very common experience for sure. What was the second part of that question?
I know. I think that was at your relationship to safety, and in terms of like surrounding yourself with people who help you grow, and connecting to the point where like, yeah, you get feedback from random strangers on the internet, but that doesn't ever take away. That doesn't threaten your
Yeah.
things, your self-worth. That things that can't be taken away.
Yeah,
from
that's
you.
like 20 years of therapy. That's where 20 years of therapy gets you. That was not happening 10 years ago or 15 years ago or maybe even 5 years ago. Yeah, that's like now. Yeah.
So if you can give like a TLDR, which like life doesn't work like that, and whatever, like, what's a TLDR of like how one gets that?
I actually have a podcast episode called How to Bomb Proof Your Self-Confidence. And it came from an exercise that I did with my therapist a very long time ago that essentially talks about the idea that if I get super duper clear on what I think about me, am I a good writer? How do I feel about my writing when I put my writing out to the world? Am I a good podcast guest? How do I feel about my guest appearances? Am I pretty? Am I smart? Am I a good driver? When I get really solid on how I feel about those, and I'm not talking about pumping myself up like, oh, I'm the most beautiful woman in the world, like honestly, really solid about how I think about me, nobody else can say anything that changes it. So I think I'm a good writer. I'm a really good writer. I do. When I read my words back, I think, wow, I'm a good writer. So when I get an Amazon review that says this is the best book I ever read, it's nice. I'm so happy that that's how you're experiencing the book, but it doesn't say anything about me as a writer. And when I get a scathing review that says it sounds like it's been written by a fifth grader, which was one actual book review I received, I'm like, wow, that's weird that that's how you're seeing it, but that doesn't matter to me whatsoever. And that's the process by which I became very comfortable and confident in receiving feedback, because the way you experience me is not my business, often has nothing to do with me. And B, all it does is perhaps provide me with opportunity to grow just a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we were talking about
I
feedback-
remember that podcast episode. It was really
Yeah.
good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to actually bring it up a little bit ago, specifically the writing thing, the you being clear on how good of a writer you feel like, and if someone comes at you, it's not going to really affect you that
Yeah.
much. I remember
Yeah.
that.
We were talking a second ago about feedback, like in that fed into part of the conversation, you use the phrase like, can I find that? And
Mm.
I've never heard that before. Can you define that for me?
Yeah, that's a Byron Katie phrase. So if you were having a conversation, if you were to say to me, you know what, Melissa, what you did last weekend was really selfish. The first thing I would ask myself is, ooh, can I find that? Can I find where I might have been selfish in that moment? Can I find it? And I will really sit with it. I will. And if I can find it, if I really can find a space or a moment or something I did that was selfish, I would say to you, you know what, Isaac, you're right. There was some element of selfishness in that. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's talk about it. If I can't find it, if that's just your perception and I honestly, in my integrity, can't find it, then I'm sorry that that's how you're choosing to experience it. But I know that I was in my integrity for the way that I behaved. So it's just a phrase I like to use in my own personal growth that helps me take that feedback and decide, is this something I can apply to my own life? Or is this just that person's experience and like that is theirs to own and I don't have to pick it up?
Totally. And I think what's really interesting about your perspective and your process is that it eliminates any shame or any like anything that could like be an attack to one's identity. And I think like in my past, how I grew up, it was like, well, if you messed up, then you're not a good person, or then you're going to hell, or then, and I think a lot of people experience that. It's like they can't, the defense comes up and they don't even want to ask, can I find that? Because if they do find that, then there's a shame associated with that. Or they might feel like they're a bad friend or all these different things. So like, has there been shame in your experience and how does one overcome that? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up Catholic. So yes, shame was my mother tongue. Guilt and shame, you know, that was, the Catholics do that really, really well. But again, it's that decision not to take it personally and that my worth and value are not tied to how I behave in any one specific moment. I think that lesson really was hammered into me early in my recovery the second time, because I entered into recovery and then relapsed after a year. And I realized coming out of it that I hadn't addressed, I still felt like a terrible, worthless, unlovable, like dirty junkie coming out of recovery. And I realized that until I changed that perception of myself, nobody else was going to change their perception. And so that was the moment where I realized that criticism of me wasn't anything I had to be ashamed of or anything that I always had to take on. It was just an opportunity for me. It was. And especially in my close relationships, you know, when my husband says like, hey, that was kind of shitty of you the other day. I really now, I mean, I think it's natural for your first reaction to be defensiveness. It always kind of flares quickly, but I'm really good at kind of sitting through that and then going, okay, was there some aspect of it that was shitty? And usually there was. And I can go, yeah, I did do that. Sorry, that's like old behavior that came up and I won't do that again. And like, let's talk about it differently. So I've had, again, that's been like a theme that I've been thinking about and working through since my recovery, which was like 21 years ago.
I love that.
Yeah.
I have like a version of that this podcast episode is not about me, so we won't dig into that. But I have a version of that I identify, like I feel that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about it after.
Okay, we have time for, I hope, like one other large subject that I hope to cover efficiently, and if not, maybe we'll call it a different thing. It occurs to me that you, and this gets at the question, and the way that I'm introducing it is already flawed, but it occurs to me that you do a lot of work that feels very consonant and resonant with who you are as a person, like the way that you conduct yourself in Whole30. It just feels like Melissa Urban to me. And I, like, real briefly, because we're running out of time.
Sure.
The question that I wanted to ask is, how do you find the work that's yours to do? I'm not even sure that's the right way to ask it, though. So how do you think about that subject?
I mean, everything that I do is for the good of the community. I don't have any good ideas. I only listen to what the community needs. And I'm very lucky in that I am truly like living my passion and I feel like my purpose. You know, it started with a self-experiment and moved into wanting to share it with other people. And now it's moved into wanting to help other people feel empowered and find their voice and change their lives. But, you know, I really think that all I do is look for ways to like serve because that makes me super happy. And that's what is going to, like, it's not just self-serving, because that also makes me really successful. It makes the business grow and it inspires loyalty. But yeah, I think that's how I think about it.
Cool.
Go ahead.
We're wrapping.
We're wrapping up.
What we're gonna do? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay,
we're wrapping up. The
Thank you.
penultimate question that we always ask our guests.
Yeah.
What does an empowered Melissa look like and feel like?
Oh, just like this, literally sitting right here. Just being willing to share and talk, being willing to like just open up and get into like a really interesting and sometimes esoteric conversation with a couple of friends, feeling like I can own my power in this moment. I feel, very powerful, and I don't feel anywhere near like ashamed or embarrassed of that confidence or that power. So yeah, I think you're getting her.
Glorious.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And lastly, tell me what you know for sure.
That I'm loved. That's what I know for sure. Yeah. That I am loved. I know.
Melissa, thank you so much for your time and for that closing note. How wonderful.
You are
Thank you.
loved by us and yourself and God, the universe, everything. Thank you so much for your time. For those of you who are listening, check out Whole30, whole30.com. I mean, you've probably seen it at Chipotle or everywhere and everywhere.
Let's be honest, you already know. It's fine.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, a lot of you came from the Whole30 Recipes Takeover.
Also, yes. Thank you all.
Love you. Okay. Thank you, Melissa. We love you, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. This was a great conversation.
This podcast is the work of Lightward, our company, named for that toward the light direction which informs every single thing that we do, including money, which means, like everything else, the way we earn revenue is not based on industry norms. It's based on what feels deeply right and aligned by passing through the door that feels like it has more behind it, not less. And the way we keep this podcast going is all Lightward. It's pay what feels good. It's an exchange of value between you and us. We're keeping conventional podcast advertising totally out of this. And here's how Pay What Feels Good works. We give you this episode because it feels good to do so. And you consider, honestly, what number of dollars this episode is genuinely worth to you. I do not care if that's $3, $1,000, or literally $0 and a heart emoji, as long as that trade genuinely makes your day better. And the energy there is the entire point. That is what we're building our business on. No advertisers, no selling your attention, just you and us, trading value in a way that builds us both up. So whatever the number, when you're done listening, head to empoweredhumanacademy.com and hit the Pay What Feels Good button. We use this policy across all of our company's work, and I'm really excited to bring it here to the world of podcasts. This is us voting for the world we want to see. Thank you for being here.